awesome to be here, and thank you so much to everybody who's gotten on bright and early or in the evening your time. As Chris said, I am one of the managers on the external development intelligence team at EA, and I just wanted to provide a little context for why I wanted to do this panel. So I've been following a lot of conversations happening internally at EA about how we as a company are embracing or deciding not to embrace emerging technologies like AI and machine learning, including blockchain and development, NFTs, and what do we do or not do with those in games in the future. And we've obviously been in a time of huge technological change for a long time, but this really, it does feel like we're really in a time of even bigger change, and the change that's really shaping the future of gaming and the world that we live in. And with that, I really wanted to make sure that we are doing what we can as part of the external development community to make sure that we really are thinking about the people behind who are making these games and the players, because I think a lot of people can get really excited about these shiny new objects being emerging tech and not really think about what that means. And so I just thought this was a great forum, and I'm really excited to have such a smart, awesome group of panelists. And with that, I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves. So let's start with Lou.
Oh, hi. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Lou. I'm a technical director working for the gaming studio at Globant.
Kate.
Hello, everyone. Kate Rayner, she, her. I'm the studio technical director at the Coalition, one of Microsoft's Xbox game studios based in Vancouver.
Jamie.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Campbell. I'm the Game Development Service Line Director at Keywords Studios, and I'm based in the UK.
And last but not least, JC with his epic facial hair reveal.
Thanks, Caroline. Hey everyone, I'm John Campbell. I'm the lead producer for external development at BioWare. No relation to Jamie, but I'm still going by JC just to differentiate.
I will say, when I first came on to XDI, I definitely got the two of you confused a number of times in emails. So good clarification, JC. Awesome. So let's dive right in. I have a question for the service provider side to start, but feel free to chime in, anybody on the panel. So first I wanted to ask, how do you see the emergence of new technology changing the type of external support that's being requested? Or if you haven't seen a big change, how do you see it changing in the future? And I'll, yeah, Lou, sorry, I should have pointed that to someone. Yeah, Lou, you want to start?
Okay. Sure. Yeah, we are seeing some changes. Of course, we like our main focus still is the same technologies that we've been handling for the past years, but we are already seeing a new trend, and we are getting a lot of questions regarding these new technologies. And the top ones are basically consulting on understanding what this is about, like what's the metaverse. Like most of our customers don't know what that is and what that means and what they can do with it. So they want to understand on a strategic level what they can do with that. Like, okay, what can we use this for? That's like the main thing that's happening right now. So we are basically, gathering a lot of information on all of the things we can do for all of the different customers. And we're also getting a lot of questions on NFT stores. Like that's what we were talking about before, like a lot of item tokenization. And that's pretty much it right now, but we will see a lot of, we foresee a lot more of impact in all of our projects, like starting on small parts, but getting involved in those new technologies in most of our projects in the future.
And Lou, a couple of questions to follow up. So would you say that you're seeing this, and if you can't answer this, that's totally fine, but are you seeing this from large clients, or are you seeing this mostly from smaller clients, or both?
Both. Maybe the more specific questions are coming from the biggest clients, like they already have people investigating and they already know what they're talking about and they just want help or opinions or things like that. But we are also getting a lot of questions from the small teams and companies.
And would you say, so when these companies come to you to ask, what can we do with the metaverse, for example, are they coming to you with, a blank slate asking that kind of question, or do they have ideas that they're bringing to you to develop? Like, are they really I guess my question is, are they coming to you truly to provide that expertise? You mentioned consulting, and so I wondered if that's what you meant.
Yeah, most of the companies come with like a blank sheet, like no idea what that is. Like they have heard of it, or they are reading about it, or they are trying to investigate, but they have no idea, and they're like, okay, what is this, and what can we do with it? Like we need to be there, whatever that is. and that's most of the consulting we are doing. But we are also getting some more specific requests with people that already know what they are talking about. But the biggest part of them don't have any idea of what that is, or have a little small idea. Like, I think I read something, my daughter says something, things like that.
Interesting. What about you, Jamie? How do you, how's emerging technology changing the type of requests that come to keywords, or how do you see that changing potentially in the future?
Okay, well, I know that the most interesting panels are not necessarily where people agree, but I have to agree with a lot of what Lou has just said. For people who aren't familiar with keywords, we've got about 10,000 staff working across pretty much a full spectrum of services. So everything from concept art, user playtesting, game development, co-development, live ops, art production, but then the more mature services like localization, audio and testing as well, and player support. So what I find is that it's different depending on the life cycle or the maturity of each of those services. But customer expectations definitely are changing. And as Lou said, we have clients who have got some domain knowledge and they're wanting to know how new tech is going to be used to improve or ensure efficiency and quality. And then we've got a whole other pool of clients who don't have domain knowledge and want information. They want that consultative educational approach. But yeah, I would say in general, we're seeing that clients want the service provider to have the knowledge of how to use the tech so that we can actually be subject matter experts for hire in a way, so that they can get a quick boost and make ground quickly. So I think that the biggest impact I see is actually on the relationships that clients will have with service provision partners. I think will become more collaborative while we evaluate emerging technologies as well between clients and suppliers. We've both got an interest not to commit as a publisher or game developer or as a service provider. None of us want to commit to a particular technology that's going to become obsolete. We don't want to make the wrong choice. So why don't we work together and try and hedge our bets to be on to bet on the winning horse and avoid that that technical shakeout that always happens as a technology starts to mature. So I think we can avoid making mistakes by working together, sharing knowledge, loving the problem together, taking a design view on the emerging tech, and having strong technology strategies that we share between ourselves as well, and look out for any gaps so we can try and avoid them.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jamie. That's really helpful, by the way. And honestly, saying something similar to what Lou said, that just corroborates, I think, the evidence that there is a growing demand in the ways that you mentioned. So I was wondering, when clients come to you and ask for your consulting services around these emerging technologies, where do you all, because like at some point there has to be a source of knowledge that you all are getting to be able to share. So what do how do you all get ramped up on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. As you know, development resources are in extremely high demand at the moment. So I think it's important, not just for keywords, but for our clients and other people operating in the same space, to try and carve out some space for innovation and make that investment. Dedicate time, resources to R&D, emerging tech, innovation, not just within the games industry, but in adjacent markets as well. We need to learn from what's happened before. Like I say, if we look at a service line like Localization, that's been revolutionized by machine translation. We shouldn't be thinking about how much our engineers, our game developers, are in demand right now. We should be looking further down the road and saying, in 5 years' time, what tools and technologies might we have, and how should we be redeploying those resources to make the best use of them? So it's very difficult to cover every base, but I think, like I say, almost having a shared technology strategy and sharing the workload between the developer, publisher, and the service provider, it can help us cover more of that space, so that we're aware of the technologies and we're getting up to speed on more than we individually have the bandwidth to do so.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the type of collaboration that might be happening even beyond the way that we collaborate currently, just in terms of information sharing. It's not something there's definitely some of that's happened up to this point, but it's not something that I personally have seen a ton of. So it's just super fascinating. Thank you. I want to switch gears over to the developer publisher side and dive into a specific question around blockchain. So JC, what kind of unique opportunities and risks do you foresee in embracing blockchain technology as part of the external development pipeline?
Thanks, Caroline. So I think there's more opportunities than risks, but I'll address the opportunities that I'm thinking about first. We're on the client side of things, so we are working with our partners to help us develop content, code, help us partnerships to build our games. So in those relationships, one of the things that's really important is clarity of ownership. And for me, the public ledger that comes with blockchain is an extremely smart way of clarifying ownership. So I don't think this is happening right now in game content, but I do actually think this could be something that is coming. So, concept art is one area that would be extremely easy to implement NFTs in now. And 3D content is something that would be the next step, the next obvious step to that. In addition to that, we also are working with some of EA's studios are heavily invested in user-generated content, and BioWare is looking at it a lot. And in that arena, ownership is extremely important as well. So whether we allow an individual to retain ownership of an asset, or whether we require transfer of ownership, blockchain could easily help with that, with clarifying that. And because it's a public ledger, it's really easy to verify those things. I think other opportunities for blockchain, a little bit outside my area of expertise, but install keys for games could be an area that it could be implemented. And then, in our partnerships, exactly as Lou and Jamie were saying, the implementation of blockchain in our games is something that we will need to partner with studios such as theirs. So, big opportunity there for additional partnerships with Keywords, Globant, and other engineering and studios that make content. On the risk side, I mean, I still look at crypto as a pretty as an example of not very wise energy usage, and I think that needs to be addressed. So if we're going to be doing any more of this, generating NFTs or any kind of blockchain code, we really have to figure out a way to do that with less impact on the environment.
Totally. And actually, I saw a Q&A pop up from Carl Schmidt about the ethical debates around things like NFTs, blockchain, crypto. So I definitely think this is a juicy topic to dive into more a little later in the panel. But yeah, absolutely. I know there's a lot of concern about that. I've seen that pop up in discussions within EA, and I'm so glad that that's being flagged, and we're not just chasing the shiny object and diving in head first without understanding that. So Kate, I'm gonna pass the torch over to you. What do you see as opportunities and potential risks in embracing blockchain?
Well, this is a pretty deep topic. Blockchain technology, such as cryptocurrencies and NFTs, have started to be adopted in a handful of video games for monetization and tracking of ownership and value of digital goods. Some of the highlights and positives that are purported are really game players being able to verify the ownership of virtual goods and securely track the transfer of ownership, the history of owners, and where digital assets can be purchased and traded with other players. These are often cosmetic items. However, they can really be anything the player can own in a game, like a vehicle or a horse or a house or even a parcel of land. Being able to verify ownership increases their perceived value through the knowledge that you can prove the rarity and authenticity of the virtual goods you own. There is a promise that goes beyond that, where you can take the virtual goods you own into other game experiences due to being able to verify your ownership outside of that game's closed ecosystem. And this is something that is actually really complex and hard to do in practice due to not having open standards of interchange of real-time data and unclear visualization rights, so of whether a game publisher will allow the visualization of their assets to show up outside their game. So all these assets are created by the game developer and possibly through an external development pipeline. So this poses a question of, should external developers be attributed as the original creators or the original owners of those digital assets? Does using blockchain to track the history of origin have implicit value in building the reputation of an external developer? In the same way, a commissioned artist might write their name on the canvas that they painted. There's like different business models that can come with this. Some of them are very controversial, like retaining the rights to monetize the resale of virtual assets down the line, or perhaps opening up new business models for external developers, like creating digital prints of assets they're creating and selling them to multiple customers, or leasing those assets. On the other side, for the risks, there's been understandable pushback from the gaming community due to the ability to create marketplaces outside of games, leading to exploitive inflation of rare and collectible items and concerns of gambling occurring outside the control of a central authority. All this gets much more concerning when transactions of ownership are done through cryptocurrencies, that translate to real world dollars. It can seem as exploitive as loot boxes and microtransactions, but really just taken to another level. There are some concerns from game publishers, or some concerns that game publishers will take a percentage of every transaction, both within their game stores, but also within gray markets that are built outside of their games. There are somewhat less controversial, we're seeing the use of NFTs for sales of digital art, like JC was saying, concept art, I think is a great example that we're seeing. And it opens the question of whether external developers creating concept arts or other forms of art that's peripheral to the game should consider retaining the ability to sell their digital art, or just be aware that downstream their art may be monetized in new ways, and should they be considering that when they're making, when they're establishing their relationships. I think today there is, there is a lot of concern about blockchain. It's quite controversial. It's hard to say whether the benefits outweigh the risks. The community sentiment right now and pushback is real, and due to the potential for exploitation, and there are scams that we're seeing in this space, especially in the areas of NFTs. However, the ability to have digital trust and verifiable ownership is really powerful, and something I think we're going to continue to see explored and developed in gaming, and an area that we should be paying attention to. I think the technologies do need to mature. I feel like we do need some standardization and some policies from platform holders on accepted practices. We're hearing from Valve that they're not allowing blockchain games in their store. Epic is saying they are allowed, but they want to ensure that they're not exploited. And so it is an area that we're seeing, it's still being maturing, and there's a lot of potential, also a lot of risk.
Definitely. And yeah, thank you so much. And I think, again, there's a lot of opportunity for some really valuable knowledge sharing between, developers and publishers. And I hope that, competition doesn't stop large developers and publishers and service providers, for that matter, of working together to develop really, cohesive policies around this. I think you're bringing up some great points. And if we're all kind of splintered in the way that we're approaching this, then I think it's going to take us, it might take us longer to really embrace and see those opportunities that you all mentioned, because we're going to have to be, swimming through and dealing with different risks rather than having a unified approach. So good stuff.
Caroline, I might add that there are some non-financial ways to implement NFTs, in an interesting way. And I'm thinking of, BioWare makes role-playing games, as most people know. And one of the things that we really like to do well is the player appearance generation, giving the player a chance to really make unique and interesting, sometimes implementations of their own faces, or implementations of the way, the way they would like to appear in the game. And, because those are unique and very heavily code-based, they could easily be implemented with NFTs. And then, transferring that appearance between multiple instances within a franchise becomes a lot easier as well. So there doesn't have to be any dollar cost associated with that. It can just be a different way of using blockchain and storing that content within a ledger and passing it back and forth.
I agree, JC. I mean, I can imagine some publishers maybe thinking about, can you take your personalization of your avatar and bring it to other games within that publisher that supports, player, personalization. That in itself is a huge technical interchange problem, but being able to track your ownership of assets across multiple games, I think would be really attractive and positive player-facing feature.
Agreed.
Definitely. Yeah, those are really, really great points. Thank you. Man, we've got some good questions popping up in Q&A, so I want to make sure we save time for that. So moving on to question about machine learning and AI. How does machine learning and AI change the way that you think about and approach external content creation. And I'm gonna hand this to Jamie first.
Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, so again, without wanting to sound like I'm repeating myself, I guess machine learning and AI impacts different parts of the business and different services in different ways. I mean, we've got concrete examples of where it's contributing a great deal already. So automation obviously playing an important part in localization and QA, speech synthesis in our audio services, texture upscaling using AI in art production, sentiment analysis in customer support. But if you look at the broader picture, I think it all comes down to adding value. How can AI and ML add value? And that might be value in the delivery of services, but ultimately it's about the value proposition for the gamers themselves and how we make better games. So, I mean, if we think about AI, we can think about AI producing smarter characters or better natural language processing, emergent stories in games, or improvements to user experience. And that all leads to deeper immersion, which we're always striving to do. And if we think about how AI then feeds into machine learning and how that helps with automation or adding variation to games, more flexibility in the gameplay, and alongside AI also feeds into emergent storytelling and therefore more immersion again. So added together, I think with AI and machine learning, we get new experiences in gameplay for people and a higher value proposition for gamers. I think previously when we've had disruptive enabling technologies in game development space, so the move from proprietary engine technology that everyone was working on their own tech years ago to commercial engines like Unreal and Unity, we never seem to reduce development team sizes. We retask the developers and we put them to different value-adding activities there, keeping those humans making the games, making them better, making them bigger, more complex. So I think for activities where there's an objective, measurable quality of output, like localization, we might reach a tipping point where there's diminishing returns when we commit more human effort to that process. But for the more creative services, I think you can argue that there's less threat of that happening because it's such a subjective area, better games. In the short term, I think games can always be better. So we can always use the developers that we've got. That might change in the longer term if somebody produces some ML and AI that can produce the perfect game. But for the moment, I think we'll be looking at how we use the technology as an enabler rather than replacing humans.
Jamie, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, localization is an interesting area. My team works mostly with content and code, but obviously BioWare localizes our games into multiple regions, and because we have fewer players in outside of North America, we do there's a diminishing benefit to the cost of localization, but with machine translations, we can probably get better translations at a lower cost and enhance the games for our players outside of North America, so they have an equally good experience as our native English speakers within North America and Western Europe. So, it's true. There's always a risk of people, being pushed out of their skilled roles by AI and machine learning. But I think that even in localization, the nuance that comes with language is something that humans can probably bring to content for a long while. And I think that applies in visual content as well. When we work with external partners to do, again, concept art, for example, the first step of that content is a kind of an ideation phase. So we work with partners to do thumbnail sketches and generate some ideas that will eventually be turned into more of an actionable 3D concept, for example. But if AI can help, if machine learning can help generate a wider swath of ideas that can be then refined by our partner artists, I think that benefits everyone because it speeds up the process. And if things run faster, then that's an opportunity for our partners to make more money. It's an opportunity for us to spend less on the process. And if there is if the AI is implemented smartly, we could actually start throwing a little bit of randomness or chaos into the process and generating unexpected ideas. So there might be a way for humans and AI to work together to develop things that neither system would have done on its own. So I'm pretty excited about that opportunity. Another area where we work with external partners for content is, again, role-playing games need a lot of 2D icons for our UIs, and AI could be very helpful in generating a huge number of icon options, and then we can work with either our internal dev teams or our external partners to pick the best options. So instead of having somebody sit down and draw 10 options for wielding a sword, we could have 1,000 options generated by an AI and then pick the 10 or 100 best that would then be implemented in the game. So huge opportunity, I think, for both sides of the partnership. You mentioned initially that idea of collaboration. So I actually think that what this kind of summarizes as is a collaboration between the people in this process and the potential AIs in this process. So, I think the sky's kind of the limit here. Right now, we're pretty focused on 2D things, but I think this could easily evolve into 3D. We've done a few experiments at BioWare, and I'll give a shout out to John Mayhew, who was on my team. He spearheaded a little research project a couple of years ago where we tried to make some sword assets for one of our games. And it was just a little 1 week research project that tech art and external development and engineering worked on together. But it really, 2 years ago, we were looking at kind of grayscale, pointillism type of art, but to look at how far things have come, we're 2 years later, we're now watching Google Research's work on the diffusion model in their, that disco implementation. And we're seeing some unbelievable, elaborate, full color 2D images that I think they're certainly competitive with fine art. We're in a commercial art world. So it's a little, they're not quite ready for commercial art implementation, but it's close. And I really think within a year or so, we'll probably be looking at some stuff that is, ready for prime time as far as commercial art from systems like that.
Wow, a year. That's
at the speed things are going.
It's on that, but
no, don't hold me to that. But the speed things are going. Even month over month, we're seeing improvements in the results.
It's really incredible. The opportunities. I think sometimes there can be a lot of concern about what that might do for people's careers, what that meaning machine learning and AI might do, but the opportunities that it might open up, both for better experience for players and content creators, but also opportunities for people to, content creators to focus on lots of other things that I'm sure are going to be, in high demand as we embrace emerging technologies, like building out, huge worlds and things like that. Not to get into, whatever the metaverse might be, but gosh, I could dive into a lot of questions. That makes me really curious about, how machine learning and AI might, change the way that service providers think about resourcing, and what type of services, like do service providers offer AI and machine learning, or Does it reduce, the number of people who are focusing on localization, for example? So many questions that I would love to have time to dive into. But I do want to get to one last question before we dive into Q&A. So this is a very broad question. However you want to, go about it is great. What is the biggest opportunity and the greatest risk? So, one and one that you foresee in embracing emerging technology for external development. And I'll hand that to Kate.
Well, each generation, the size of our development teams have grown. We've been seeing an order of magnitude as we go from the 360 era to the Xbox One and PS4 era to now in the larger AAA, especially the open world games. Easily you see 1,000 developers or more. A lot of this growth has actually been feeding the growth of external development pipelines to be able to feed the insane amounts of content that goes into these games. What we're seeing now is more increase and focus on using emerging technologies of machine learning and procedural technology to be able to augment the creation of our assets. These are showing up in things like the creation of digital humans, character and facial animations, audio content. I believe this will evolve to become really a new tool in multiplying our artist vision across all the content we create. So external content creators will really also benefit from becoming proficient and familiar with these technologies and using them to augment their craft and the amount of content they're able to create, but also be able to work more closely with game teams on creating larger, more demanding worlds. What we're looking at now, we're seeing over 100x detail increase using some of the real-time rendering techniques that we're using in our games. We're having to use techniques like photogrammetry and other really high polygon modeling techniques to create these assets and then scale them across massive worlds. It's just not possible to do it realistically with human effort alone. So I think this is an area we're going to see a lot of evolution and focus for opportunity in content creation.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I second everything that Kate just said.
Any major risk that you foresee at this point?
I think as soon as you get machine learning and AI involved in creating content, you have to worry about how those systems are trained, the data that they're trained from, what sort of bias might be inherent in that data, and how that can then affect and result in unintended consequences. And what is created, you think about things like inclusive character creation or modeling authentic cultural representations of environments and spaces, just to name a few examples. It shows up in other areas when you get into examples we had of like localization and cultural references, and there's a lot of work and focus and discussion around ethics in AI and machine learning, and this has to be applied here in this space as well.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of second what Kate's saying. I think that gender and racial bias in the implementation of AI and then the use of AI is probably the risk that I'm most worried about. Kate had a lot of good points about the risks of cryptocurrency, and I'm going to let smarter people than me solve those problems. But the one that really is from a content user perspective, it's equity. That is the thing that we just need to do better at. We already can see that in current AI implementations that there's way too much racial and gender bias built into those systems. So we can definitely do better.
Thanks, JC. Thanks, Kate. Such good insight. Lou, what about you? What do you foresee as the biggest opportunity and maybe the greatest risk from your point of view?
First, I'm gonna second everything that Kate and JC just said. Like, I think they made great points. I think that, yeah, we are like on the verge of a new era. Like, this is gonna open a lot of opportunities for all of us. I think we need to try to embrace it and learn as much as we can so that we do not make the same mistakes we did in the past, as the guy said. We need to make sure that those generated contents are being monitored, and then we make sure that everybody gets a fair treat there. And also we need to make sure that everybody, that nobody gets left behind. These changes are also impacting a lot of people all the time, and some people sometimes feel left out because, you know, they were, I don't know, content creators or something like that, and they're like, hey, they're taking my job. Like, it's a common topic, and we gotta make sure those people are reskilled and upskilled, and that they can provide more value. What Jamie mentioned a few minutes ago was super important, that it's not that we don't need that people anymore. We need so many people that we need to make sure that all the things that can be parallelized or that can be created by something can be created by something, and that we use that knowledge to things we cannot replace. So that's very important to make sure that everybody knows about that, and that no one feels left behind. And about risk, I think they have also mentioned everything. I do want to also mention about security. Blockchain and all of the new emerging tech comes with risk, and the biggest risk is that we don't know much about it. Like, we're starting to know all this new technology and what we can do with it, and every day we get new uses and new things we can do, and there's a lot of good people investigating that, and there's a lot of bad people investigating that. So we need to make sure we go giving, you know, baby steps, and making sure what we are doing is going in the right direction, and we're not providing like a lot of information to people who shouldn't have it, and creating backdoors that we don't want there.
Totally. Yeah, it's like, you know, there's always the risk of technology, not to end on a negative note by any means. There's just incredible opportunities that you all have highlighted, but yeah, thinking about, you know, the fact that this technology, so much technology is emerging so quickly that you know, it's outpacing our human ability to even understand what it's doing, and that you know, is kind of wild to think about. So yeah, it's so fast. Are we moving at a faster pace than we can even keep up with? And we could do so many breakout sessions from this. I think I'll say this is great information. I hope that this has been as valuable to everyone else as it has to me. It's been just incredibly informative. What a great panel. I feel very fortunate to have had you all join this, and I think for XDS might have to do some follow-up conversations around this, Chris. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and have a great rest of XDS Ignite. Sorry. Thanks.
Chris, thanks for moderating. Caroline, thanks for setting this up. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
So much. Thanks. Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.